السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما مولانا وسيدي صاحب العصر والزمان، روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، وأجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف، ولعنة دائمة على أعدائهم ومنكر فدائلهم الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. First off, thank you for attending this evening's session that we're going to be going over Khums, the Islamic tax. I'm just at the preliminary, so it is about an hour and a half program. And hopefully we're going to be able to address the questions you might have already in your mind during the presentation. So I would ask, if you do have any questions, if you can just maybe make a note of them mentally or on paper, and if we don't cover your particular question during the session, then we will have time at the end for questions and answers. That's point number one. Point number two is that I'm not going to really delve deep into trying to prove Khums. I'm presuming that we all accept the Khums as being a religious obligation. So I'm not going to go into the defense and to prove the obligation of Khums within our teachings, but I will go into just one of the verses of the Quran, the only verse of the Quran about Khums, and just one hadith to show us that this is a concept which exists within our teachings. But again, I won't go into the elaboration on proving its validity. So to begin with, for tonight, this session, obviously when we look at the topic of Khums, we could look at it at least two different levels. One is in terms of our personal life, and one is if we have our own business. Both obviously are requirements. If we have a business, obviously we need to know how to calculate Khums for our own businesses. Because, however, the laws of the business are a bit more, they're a bit more in depth, and they might take a bit more time to explain. So I'm not going to go into the business aspect at all for this session. If you have questions, we can probably discuss it later or another time. I want to really focus just on the personal aspect of Khums, our own personal estate, our own personal wealth and savings, because that in itself is obviously a vast topic. But we will again try to go into most of what is required for us as individuals to pay the Khums. So the first question is that what is Khums? It's also called Khumus, as you'll see in within the Quranic aspect. Literally, this word Khums means 1/5 or 20%. And so what happens is that Islam has obviously a lot of different obligations within its teachings. One of them is this thing called Khums, which is a 20% tax, we can call it, on our net savings at the end of our fiscal year. So that's all the word Khums means, is 1/5 or 20%. As I mentioned, that there is a basis in the Quran about Khums. So there aren't multiple verses. For example, there's not, like in terms of salat, in terms of the namaz or prayers, we have hundreds of ayat that talk about praying. There are multiple verses about zakat, multiple verses explaining the hajj. But in the entire Quran, we have only one verse that talks about Khums. And that's in chapter 8, which is called Surah Al-Anfal, which you can translate as the spoils of war. And it's verse number 41, in which Allah says, وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ إِن كُنتُمْ آمَنْتُم بِاللَّهِ. Allah says, and you Muslims must all know that whatever you gain as wealth, that 1/5 of it, 20%, is for Allah and for the messenger, being the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And for the near of kin, and the orphans, and the needy, and the wayfarer from the family of the Prophet. And we'll go into how this verse fits with our understanding of Khums later on. If you have true belief in Allah. So again, this is the only time that Allah ever speaks about Khums within the Quran. Sometimes we maybe just as a side note, sometimes we wonder, well, if a thing is only mentioned once in the Quran, is it really important, right? Many other things are mentioned multiple times. But one of the things that we should keep in mind is that just because Allah talks about one issue or one item of Islam once in the Quran, it doesn't diminish the importance of it, right? Whether it's one time or 10 or 100 or 1,000, the fact that Allah has mentioned it, that in and of itself should show us the importance of that particular topic. So again, I don't want to delve too much into the proving the obligation of khums. We'll really go through this quite quick, but I do want to mention that we have a compilation of hadith called Wasail al-Shia. This is compiled by the late Shaykh Khur-Al-Amali. About 400 years ago he lived, and he wrote this book. In the current edition, it's printed in 30 volumes, in which there are over 36,000 hadith. And his whole goal in compiling this encyclopedia of hadith were just to highlight all the hadith about ahkam, from taharat, najasat, praying, fasting, khums, zakat, hajj, all the way through the ahkam of Islam. So that was his whole goal, is just ahkam hadith in one comprehensive collection. He spends 30 years compiling this book, and when you go to the chapter on khums, he has over 80 hadith in 15 different sections in relation to the practical application of khums. So this is where I say that even though there may only be one verse of the Qur'an, but ultimately we believe that it's up to the Messenger of Allah and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam to explain the ayat. And so we have again 80 hadith at least, if not more, about khums. And I'm just going to give you one of the hadith that we have in this collection. And it comes in volume 6, hadith number 1 from section 8, where Abu Ja'far Athani, our Imam Jawad alayhi salam, he says that companions wrote a letter to him, asking him, and they said that please advise us concerning the khums, for that which is excess from all that a person spends, from either a small amount or a great amount. And the Imam replied in his own handwriting that khums is obligatory after all of your expenses have been covered. So he didn't limit it only to spoils of war or what we'll see are the other categories where khums is applicable. He basically made a general statement that after all of your expenses, your obligatory expenses, your permissible expenses have been covered, then that 20% khums, that 1/5, is now an obligation after you have made all of your yearly expenses. We go back to that verse, and again, just the one portion where it says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ. And you Muslims must all know that whatever you gain as wealth, that 1/5 of it is for Allah and for the Messenger, being again our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala. Now the portion that we want to go now into is obviously not based on the verse of the Quran. We're going to look at it, the practical application of the khums. And most importantly is when Allah says that whatever you gain, right? And the question which would come up hopefully in our mind is, well, what does that mean? Where do we get gain from? Are all forms of income, what are all the forms of income that Islam would consider khums to be an obligation upon? What are the ways that we earn money or that we gain money? And then because once we understand what Islam has determined as being where that wealth comes from, then we can understand the 20% obligation. So we have it in the books of our scholars, again based on the hadith, that khums is a wajib tax on 7 different things. The last 5 I made mention in yellow because these are really not applicable to most of us living in the West. Right? Number 1 obviously is a surplus or profit on income. So you work, you have a job, you have a monthly income. That surplus, that is khums above, that portion has to have khums paid on it. Number 2 is legitimate wealth mixed with illicit wealth. Somebody, for example, buys Lotto 649, they win the jackpot. They mix the money together. Now they don't know between the money they earned at work and the money they won in the lottery, or if they went to the casino, they mix all that money together. They don't know how much was the winnings, how much is their halal money. When you don't know, then khums is applicable on the total sum. The other 5, again, I'll just mention them, although we don't use them. I mean, for us here, probably none of us would have khums on these. 1 are mines and minerals. Number 4 are precious stones that you obtain from the sea by diving. Most of us don't involved in that. Treasures that are buried under the ground. Land which a dhimmi, non-believer, so a dhimmi is a non-Muslim living under an Islamic government. The land which he would purchase from a Muslim, that is khums applicable. Again, we don't have that situation here. And number 7 are spoils of war. Right? You fight in a war, Muslims capture enemy troops, the possessions they had, that is also khumsable. But again, those 5 are not applicable to most of us probably. And so we obviously won't even be looking at those. And if you are in those businesses, and obviously we can talk about it later, but it won't affect most of us. So those are the 2 main ones, the surplus of profit of income and legitimate wealth mixed with illegitimate wealth. Go to now a bit further of a granulation of this profit or surplus, right? Because there are different categories of what that surplus or profit can entail. And we have 5 categories there. So number 1 is the earnings from business, right? We have our own small business, let's say. Or we work for a company, so we earn wages, our monthly or bi-weekly salary. Or we have investments in the bank and we get dividends out of that. That is classified as a profit if there's any surplus left after the 1 year. And so that's just one point I should make note of, that khums is not on your gross earnings, right? So you get your paycheck every other Friday. It's not on that paycheck you get. It's after all of your expenses have been covered. And we'll look at what expenses are permissible within Islam. But the surplus, again, it goes back to the wages, your salary, investments. The other 4 are based, according to Ayatul Sistani, on what he calls al-ihtiyat al-wajib, which is an obligatory precaution, which means that he does not have the knowledge to give a fatwa. So he says, based on my precaution, do this. But if you see any time your marja says an ihtiyat wajib, you can follow the next most knowledgeable scholar, and if they have a ruling, a fatwa, you can follow that. So Ayatul Sistani, for example, says that gifts, prizes, bonuses, you have to consider that as your profit, right? So you get a bonus at work, let's say end of the year Christmas bonus. If you follow Sayyid Sistani, let's say, he says that khums is applicable on a bonus or a gift that your company would give you. If that stayed for 1 year without you using it, khums is applicable. But people like Ayatollah Khoui, other scholars like Imam Khomeini said you don't pay khums on a gift, no matter how long you have it. Right? So there are a difference of opinion amongst the scholars on some of these issues. Number 2 is charity, sadaqah. So maybe you have a person who is being helped by a community member by getting sadaqah to live. Ayatul Sistani again says, based on precaution, that person would also need to pay khums if any excess remains after their fiscal year. Another example is zakat or khums. If a person is being paid by any of those forms of income from a community, from an institution, from a scholar directly, and they have excess remainder at the end of the year, again, that is also liable for khums. And the last one is an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. So if it's a close relative, a family member like husband and wife, children, parents, you inherit from those close family members, you'll see that there'll be no khums on that, even if you have it for 10, 20, 30 years. But if it's from a distant relative, like in the 2nd or 3rd or 4th category, which we looked at a few months ago in our whale seminar, if it's from a distant relative whom you never anticipated to receive money from, or a friend passed away and in their will they said, I wanted to leave you a certain amount of money as a gift, as from his will as an inheritance, then that is, again, according to Sayyid Sistani, based on ihtiyat, on precaution, that khums would have to be paid on that if it exceeded your expenses for 1 year's period. So these are pretty much all of the things on which, and we'll go into a bit more granular detail later on and look at other aspects of investments and money in which khums is applicable, but we'll suffice for that right now. With that said, there are certain things which are khums exempt forever. Certain money that you will get, certain things that you'll get in hand, property, not necessarily cash, not necessarily like liquid cash. You might get certain things, and those certain things are exempt forever, no matter how long you have it, even if you've never ever used it in your life. And we have 4 categories there. One is the mahar. So when a woman marries, it is an wajib, it's an obligation on the man to provide a mahar. It has to be some tangible commodity. It could be a Quran, it could be $1,000, it could be a 50,000, whatever the case may be. This is an obligation for the man to give to the woman. And that mahar never has khums applicable on it. So if a woman gets, let's just say $50,000 as her mahar, and she keeps it for 30 years and she never spends it, it never has khums on it. It doesn't matter how long she keeps that money. So this is one of the things that is exempt from khums. Number two is, as I said, inheritance. So you have a close family member pass away, maybe your parents, maybe the children, you lose your brother or a sibling or your spouse, whatever the case may be, that close inheritance, there is never khums on that money. It can stay for 50 years. Right. Now obviously if you invest it and you get a return, a dividend on that, that's a separate issue. But the actual inheritance, there is never khums on that. That is khums exempt. Interestingly enough, an insurance payout for a personal injury is khums exempt. So if you have a life insurance, or you have an insurance policy, and let's say you, God forbid, you have an accident at work and you lose your right hand, or you become, wheelchair bound, something happens in that kind of a situation. You have a personal injury, that insurance payout is khums exempt as well. There's no khums on that money. So you get it from, let's say, from the insurance company or whoever. Lawsuit happens, that money, there's never khums on that amount. And loans also are khums exempt, right? So this became a big issue, at least for us back home in Ontario, with students going to university. And they get student loans, right, from the school, from the university, or from the provincial government. Do you pay khums on it? You get a loan for, let's say, $20,000 for your university tuition or something. The ruling is that there is no khums on loans, whether you get it from an individual, so a friend loans you $1,000, right, to pay some bills or to make an expense, or you get a student loan for your schooling studies. There's no khums on that money. Or you borrow money from the bank. You need to buy a car, let's say. The money gets into your bank account. Your khums date comes. You have $30,000, $40,000 in your bank account. But because that's a loan, there is no khums on that money. So that basically covers things that are exempt. And this is pretty much the entire list. There are no other, that I've seen, there are no other exceptions to that. So if it doesn't fall into one of these four, generally speaking, there would be khums applicable on anything other than these four items. As I said previously, that khums is applicable on our net savings after all of our justifiable expenses have been covered. So it's not that you get your paycheck again and you pay it immediately. You are allowed to deduct all of your legitimate expenses. And it's not, you might ask, well, what is a legitimate expense, right? Because certain things are not permissible to buy, and some things obviously we're allowed to buy. So I've compiled a brief list of what is a valid expense within Islam. Things like food and drink obviously are valid expenses. Accommodation, your rent, your mortgage, if you're renting an apartment, transportation expenses, furniture and appliances, educational, medical expenses, marriage expenses, hajj and ziyarat, any donations you give, your khums, zakat, religious dues, gifts you give to people. Insurance premiums are a valid expense. Membership dues, you're a member of a golf club or a fitness club or something. Taxes we pay to the federal government, provincial government, these are valid expenses. Mandatory deductions, CPP, EI premiums that we pay. Basically, anything which is a legitimate expense that Islam is permitting us to spend money on is a valid expense, meaning that we would never have to pay khums if we spent on any of these things. Obviously, this is in terms of our need. If we're going to the level of greed, and we look at that later on, there is khums applicable when we exceed the limits of what we should be spending. If you're wondering, well, what is an invalid expense that you have to pay khums on? Basically, in a summary, is anything which we spend on haram and impermissible. Somebody smokes drugs, right? And might happen. Alcohol, people might spend money on. Lottery tickets, gambling, casinos. Anything which the Sharia defines as haram or forbidden, if you were to spend money on that, that money would not be considered a valid expense. So you would, if you're a religious person who drinks, which is a bit of an oxymoron, because if you're religious, you wouldn't be drinking. But if you were a religious Muslim and you drank and you smoked drugs and you spent $1,000, let's say a month, you would have to pay khums on that money, right? Because it's not a valid expense. What about cigarettes? So cigarettes is one of those things where our scholars differ, right? I mean, they say that if it is proven to cause health issues, either now or in the future, it's haram to start. If you are a smoker now and you cannot quit, it's okay to continue. You should try to wean yourself off of it. But if it's haram for you to start smoking today and somebody does start to smoke, then in addition to the $15 a pack or whatever you're paying, you'd also have to pay the khums on that as well. So yeah, anything which is haram, like in and of itself, like drugs, alcohol, these things, or that have become haram, like over time, like smoking, for example, for those, and it's proven by doctors that it is a serious health issue, that would be haram. Yeah. Let me go now into some, again, so that's just a basic overview. So you'll find that khums is pretty easy, right? It's not a very complex formula and calculation. It's pretty simple, but there are a lot of nuances. There are a lot of things that have come up, especially because now we live in a new era where there are a lot of new things happening, new forms of investment, new forms of savings, and that's where maybe a lot of our questions might come in, because I'm sure we know if I have $10,000 saved at the end of the year, 20% is khums, we're done. It's pretty straightforward. But when we live in a society where there's a lot of ways to save money, sometimes we get questions about this, and that's what I wanted to actually spend a bit more time upon, which are really practical things that come upon us on a day-to-day basis. Right? One is RRSPs. Right? Just the name itself, it tells us it's a registered retirement savings plan. So because it is a form of savings, you're taking all of your excess money whether it's at the end of the year before the February deadline to put into your RRSP, or if you're doing monthly contributions. Because it is a savings, by its definition, it is Khums-liable. And khums must be paid on the initial investment you put into the RRSP. So let's say you wait till the end of February, I think the end of February, to put your RRSP contribution in. If you put in, let's say, $10,000 that you've saved from work, $2,000 is your khums payment on that $10,000. So we have to, at a level, obviously one thing that I tell people is that we as Muslims have to be very good accountants, right? We should know how to use the spreadsheets unless we do everything on paper. If not, we should have the accounting software, Excel or whatever you use to keep track of your amounts. You should also have to budget, because if you are going to put in, let's say, 10 or 20,000 to an RRSP for a yearly contribution, whatever your maximum limit is that the CRA will give you, you need to also ensure that you have enough liquid assets to cover your khums of that money. So if you're going to put in 20,000, your khums would be 4,000. You need to keep 4,000, or you have to have access to $4,000 to pay the khums on that initial investment, right? The increment, the returns that we get on our RRSPs, the capital gains, whatever you want, whatever it's going into, scholars say that because we don't have access to take it, it's a retirement plan. So it's when you get to be 65 or 70, you begin to draw from it. You don't pay khums on that, on the increment that you get. So whatever return rate the bank is giving you, you don't pay on that, but you have to keep records again still that this is how much you put in every year, and to know when you retire how much of your entire RRSP account is your own money you put in and that you've paid khums on, and how much is the gains on it. One of the things though that we should keep in mind is that when you begin to draw from your RRSP, let's just say, for example, you retire, you have $100,000 in your RRSP. And let's just say you've gained $20,000 in the time that it was, being invested. When you begin to draw from that money, take it with the niyat, with the intention that you're drawing from the interest, not from the principal. Because your principal is khums covered. Your interest isn't. So if you start drawing from the money which is the interest, then as long as if you don't have any of that savings after the year, then there's nothing else to pay on that khums, right? So you get $100,000 you invested, let's say, you retire, you got a $20,000 gain in it. When you retire, when you draw the money from it, whatever, if it comes into your account every month, take that money and pay your bills with the niyat, with the intention that you're taking it from the interest, not from the principal that you put in. That way the principal is khums free, you're not touching that amount until you finish off using all of the interest on that account. Another thing that we have as a savings, especially, well, only here in Canada, is the TFSA, the tax-free savings account. Right? Again, the government calls this a savings account. You're saving money for the future, which means you don't have an immediate need for it right now. Right? You have that savings and now you're putting it into this, so at least the returns on it are tax-free. The amount that you put in is Khums-liable. So I think every year it's $5,500 is the maximum. There was one year that they increased it to $10,000, but it's back down to $5,500 now. If you put in the maximum every year, that $5,500, Khums has to be paid on that amount. Right? So that's $1,100 for that $5,500 if you do the maximum contribution. If you are locking it in, if you invest it and it's locked in for, let's say, a 3-year, 5-year term, let's say you go into mutual funds or whatever you're investing in, if you can't access those returns, then there's no khums on those returns. But if you put it in a regular savings, in an everyday savings account, and you are getting that daily interest savings and you have access to that, then you should be paying khums on that return that you're getting, because it's in a savings account which you can easily go to the bank and you know how much you're getting. It's an amount online in your portfolio that you'll see every month how much interest you get. You would pay on that. But if it's an investment locked in and the market fluctuates, obviously, you won't know until 3 years or 5 years or however long. Then you obviously are not paying any khums on the return of that investment. Another thing which is unique to Canada is the RESP, the Registered Education Savings Fund, that a lot of parents will do for their children, right? And they'll save up for their university or post-secondary education. Again, this is a savings plan, as the government themselves call it. And because it is a savings, it is excess money that you have at the time or at the end of the year. It again is Khums-liable, and khums has to be paid on the initial amount. The increment in form of the interest or capital gains, because it's locked in and you're not allowed to use it till your child matures, they get of age, they go to post-secondary. What ends up happening, it becomes a bit more complex. So you as the father or mother would be paying into the RESP and you're paying your khums on it. When your boy or girl reaches of age, they go to university, that money is now transferred into their name legally. If they don't use all the money in the first year of their university or post-secondary, they have, let's just say you have $100,000 in there. They only end up using $20,000, let's say in their first year, or 25, let's just say $20,000. $80,000 remains. Now this is the child's money, the young woman or young man's money. They now have to pay khums if it exceeds 1 year that they have it. So it's not a double paying of khums because you had to pay it because it was your savings. Now you're transferring ownership to your child. They are now the beneficiary, the one who is receiving this. Now it is in their possession, and so now they have to pay khums on that money if it exceeds the 1 year. Can you do that though is a question. Can you, because I mean I have one for my daughter, but I don't know if you can actually, I think it's just one account, right? I don't think you can actually differentiate it in multiple years of tuitioning, of schooling, I think.
Let me rephrase the question.
Mm-hmm.
So generally when you're contributing to RESP,
yes.
what happens is on the first year, once you prove it to them that your child is registered,
yes.
they give you the
Yes.
right? And then the subsequent years, again, every year you have to prove. And in those subsequent years, you get paid the growth portion of it. So let's say, the amount that I've contributed towards my child is $40,000.
Mhm.
But for first year tuition, it's only $20,000.
Okay.
The question is, even though I already paid Khums,
Yeah.
for the whole 40,000,
Yeah.
he have to pay Khums on the remaining 20,000 that he is saving to use it for subsequent years.
According to the fatwas of today, yes, they would. If the government, and I haven't looked into this, but if the government is giving that your child all of that money at one time, and they're saying, okay, you had, let's say, 100,000 given to you as an RRSP by your parents, here's the entire lump sum, then yes, they would be paying Khums on whatever remains after all of their expenses for that first year. That's as of the fatwas of today, though. Yes.
So when you pay, for instance, I thought for my kids RRSP, but I never paid Khums on it.
Yes.
First year, the initial first year, they send you back your principal, and then after moving forward,
Mhm.
they give you dividend of that principal. So that is not honestly, depends how many what you bought. Right?
Yeah.
How many tickets or how many
Yeah.
you buy, right? So would that not be counted under my expense at that time when I bought it? The installment that I pay every
Yeah.
month, would it not be my expense then?
No, well, it is an expense, but it's a saving, right? So the Khums is on savings, not on valid expenses, right? So the RESP is you're saving for your child's future education. It's not an expense that you're paying right now. Like you're not paying the tuition right now in advance, for example, right? So the government classifies it as being a savings plan for the child's future, right? It's not like a pre-planned, it's not like a prepaid university tuition that's going on. And so because of that, again, because of the fatwa that we have today, the way that our scholars understand it today, and again, obviously it's up for debate and discussion if the government has a way of how they utilize the funds or how you can be taken out. This ruling might change. But as it stands right now is that because this is a individual saving for their children, the parent or whoever's putting that money away would have to pay because of the savings. And then because the child is being gifted that, or not gifted, but the government is saying now the ownership of that RESP account, if the children go to school, right? So let's say you have an RESP for your children. If they go to school, they get that money. But if they don't go to school, the government will give you back that money. And they would obviously not give you back the percentage that they would have contributed, right? So if that were to happen, and let's say a parent put in $100,000, if the children didn't go to university or they didn't want that money, that would go back to the parent. If they had already paid Khums on it, then obviously there would be no Khums to be paid on that. If the parents didn't pay Khums, then obviously they would have to pay Khums because it was due on it when they initially put the money away. The next issue is about child. Oh, sorry, yes.
Buy RSP by taking a loan.
Uh-huh.
Then you still pay after a month after when you start cashing it?
If you take a loan to buy an RRSP, good question. Because on loans there is no Khums. I will take a look into that, but yeah. Khums on loan. I believe it is there, but I will confirm though. Child allowance that even the government gives currently for obviously parents who, it depends on your personal income. The government does give a monthly allowance. If parents use that for the day-to-day expenses of the family, of the children, or the family, the home in of itself, and nothing remains, and there's obviously no Khums on it. Some parents want to keep that in a child's separate account, and that way the kids can have that money when they grow up. The late Ayatollah Khoyi said because a child who's not baligh doesn't have any obligation, so he said that a child would not have to pay Khums on that money. Ayatollah Sistani says he looks at Khums and not at the level of the child, but in the sense that the guardians are the parents or the guardians of the child. They're holding that money in trust. And so Ayatollah Sistani says that there would be khums payable even for children who are non-baligh, for all of the money that they get. If you give them an allowance and they save it, they have a little paper route, or they do babysitting, whatever money even a child has, Ayatollah Sistani, he says, in his opinion, is that children who are even non-baligh, they have to pay khums even on that money, even though they're not baligh yet. And obviously they're not baligh, so they're not doing taqleed to a particular marja, so that would go to their guardian. So if the father does taqleed to, let's say, Ayatollah Sistani, that money would go to that particular marja. If the mother is doing taqleed to another one, it's, let's say, a single parent, obviously the things are different, but whoever is the guardian of that child, that money would go to that particular marja whom the guardian is from the parent side. Coming to another practical issue is saving for a home. Right? We know that in our society it's virtually impossible to buy a house with cash unless you're very well off. We're all, saving for a down payment, and we, try to save as much as we can based on the laws of the province and the country on how much you can take a mortgage for. Traditionally speaking, so going back maybe 5 years ago, you had to pay homes on your savings if you were a first-time home buyer. But as of recent, Ayatollah Sistani has actually changed his fatwa. And him and a few other scholars say that if you're saving to buy a house for your first-time home buyer, so not as an investment, but to move into a house, you're in an apartment or a condo and you want a home, he says that if within the common culture of a society, if a person not having a house would be something that people would, consider to be that you're not taking care of your family, you're neglecting your family, it's beneath your status to live in an apartment or a low rental or whatever. He says if you're in that kind of a situation and you're saving for a home, there's no khums on that money. So this depends, again, the marja isn't giving a fatwa and saying that automatically it's a blanket that you don't have to pay khums. He's saying that look at your community. If, let's say, the majority of us here in this room today, if we say that we discuss it and we come to a conclusion that, to live in Canada and for a family not to have their own physical home and they're renting and paying, crazy amounts of rent, if that's not conducive to a family life, that a family needs to have their own dwelling, and it feels like, if a father or their husband doesn't do that, or if the mother she's a bread earner, if she's not giving that to the family, then it's like you're not taking care of the family. If we come to that conclusion on our own, then savings for a first-time home buyer would be khums exempt. So you can save for 4 or 5, 10 years with the niyat, the intention that money is for a home, and you would not pay khums on that money. Once you make the down payment, then obviously, once you've made the down payment, you've bought the home. Now, after that, in subsequent years, if you have savings, obviously you have to pay khums. But the lead up to the savings to put the initial down payment, that would be khums exempt. Again, about probably 5 years ago, this ruling did not exist. So this is something very recent that at least 2 scholars, the late Ayatollah Fadil Lankarani, who passed away in Qum about 8 to 10 years ago, he had a similar fatwa, and Ayatollah Sistani currently has this ruling. First-time home buyers can save, and their savings is khums free. A wedding, right? For a child's wedding, obviously we know that the expenses to get married are huge, depending on the culture and what kind of marriage the family wants to have. But any money or items accumulated for a daughter's marriage is exempt from khums. This is the general ruling that all of the maraja have. If you have a daughter, any amount you save for her wedding or gifts, jewellery, dishes, whatever you want to put together for your daughter's wedding, that is khums exempt. Traditionally, it's only been for the daughter, but Ayatollah Sistani, he has revised his ruling based on his research, and he has a fatwa where even if you're saving for your son's marriage and you know that you can't make the expenses for the marriage in the same year of the marriage. So let's say you know that this year, 2018, your son is getting married, but you know that you can't save enough money in this 12-month or 9-month period for the wedding. He allows that you can save multiple years in advance for the wedding of your boy, and all of those expenses would be khums exempt. You wouldn't have to pay khums on that money. Again, for the daughter, it's the de facto, it's the default rule is for the girl, it's always been there as a ruling. And again, this applies for cash. So you're saving up money to give your daughter a cash gift when she gets married, or you're buying things for their home, right? Or you're buying her jewellery or whatever the case may be. Literally, there's no limit to that. As long as you're keeping it aside, like you have a separate bank account, or you have a separate, a spreadsheet that I've kept this much money every year away aside for the marriage, that money is khums free. There's no need to pay khums on that. Yes?
So what if like we keep like a bunch of money and then we're just like, oh, this is for like my daughter's wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and suppose like a rainy day too, so it's kind of like mixed.
Okay.
Then would there be khums on that?
Yes, there would be. Yeah. So if you're keeping the money aside for the wedding, pretty much don't use that. I mean, we may be able to say that you could use it, but you'd have to put that money back in. Like let's say a family saved $20,000 and some major problem comes up and they need to take from that. Let's say they take out $5,000 to pay an expense. As long as they're going to fulfill and put that money back in, then you'd be okay. But it can't be just like a double intention, a double niyat for that. They use it for a wedding or something else. Right?
We make that when we get in order to be exempt.
Correct. Yeah.
Also, this is kind of back to the loans and stuff. What
Mhm.
about grants and money? Like sometimes people like the government gives grants.
Mhm.
This is like a low income or whatever.
Okay.
So would that fall under khums? Doesn't that count as a bonus from the government? Yeah. Because it's free money.
Yeah.
It's not a loan.
Yeah, those would probably be bonuses and gifts from the government. Well, I guess that's from the school. If somebody has like an exceptional, like high grade point average or something, if they're doing exceptionally well in studies, right, they'll get a grant or a bonus. I'll make a note of it, but I'm pretty sure that would also be khums exempt. Those bonus, that kind of a gift that you get, like I believe so. Yes. Yeah. So, yes. Okay.
That money is exempt or you have to pay.
So you take from your line of credit to buy a house.
And it's a principal house, not an additional.
Mm-hmm. Taking from your line of credit. So, I mean, it's not savings though, right? It's not savings, so
You'll be paying interest and you'll be paying it off.
yes.
So mine is going to say, there's no khums, but you have to right? Budget what is budget.
It's just like you're borrowing money for anything though, right? So,
It's a loan.
it's a loan, basically. You're paying, yeah, so it's a loan. Right. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just get this more review. Because I've asked you this before, but I didn't understand that because I think it's so unclear.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say that I'm working for 6 months in a year. So I went on mat leave, right?
Okay.
I don't get mat leave for my job.
Okay.
I have to save money
Okay.
from my money from the months that I'm working
Yes.
in order to be able to take time off because my standing expenses still stack, right? Like my
Yeah.
insurances, my mortgage, etc., right?
Sure.
Okay, so I saved while I was like when I was pregnant, so that when I'm off, I can be at home with my kids for a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so that was all during one fiscal year, right?
Yeah.
From Muharram. And so then I had to pay homes on this money I saved for my legitimate expenses, but I didn't factor homes into my savings.
Mm-hmm.
So that sucked. Like I had to pay 20% of my savings for my mortgage and my food and
Sure.
everything, like my car payments and everything.
Okay.
I had to go to homes
Yeah.
because I didn't know that I had to save for that. And I don't understand why that's the case because let's say somebody works for 1 month in a year and they make enough money in that 1 month to pay for their whole year, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't work for the whole rest of the year. They still have all those expenses. Why does it matter if you work
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like, gonna spend all my money at the end of the year so that I don't have anything to save.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I'm not saying that, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, well, it's a legitimate expense and then you have to pay close on something that you saved because you have to give yourself an income. So how come it's like that?
But even when you're on maternity leave, I mean, or a husband goes on the paternity leave as well, right? If they're working, I mean, they're still receiving money from the government for that time period, right?
No, we don't. Physicians don't.
Okay.
You have to save. You have to save your own money
Mm.
to go on mat leave.
Okay.
So like, let's say my standing expenses every month are $6,000.
Mhm.
Okay, let's say.
Yeah.
Right? And let's say that I save $18,000 so that I can be off work for 3 months. But then now you have to pay home, so actually you have to save more than $18,000. You have to
Yeah.
save 20 something so that you can go on mat leave.
But obviously the khums is at the end of the year, right? So, you'd also have to keep that in mind, right? Like if you're saving, let's say a person saves for the entire 2017 to go on mat leave in 2018.
Yeah.
There is still going to be a khums on that because of that savings, right? Oh.
The way,
Yeah, that makes sense.
so the way
Yeah.
I've understood,
Mhm.
and maybe I can take it further the way she has described it. So
Mhm.
let's say, for example, my fiscal year is
Yeah.
Muharram to Muharram,
Yep.
right? And my wife happens to go 2 months before Muharram starts,
Okay.
but she has already saved enough for 12 months because she knows she's going to be off for the next 12 months.
Okay.
At the end of 2 months, there is going to be funds enough to carry me on for the remaining 10 months.
Yes.
Do I have to pay homes for it, knowing very well I'm not going to have any income?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm paying homes for the money I have to pay for my bills for the
Following year, yeah.
Am I paying homes on that? I think that's how I understood it from.
Yeah. As of what I understand of the fatwa right now that the Maraja have given, the answer is yes, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not room for explaining the ruling to the Maraja and asking them that, look, this is a situation, for example, that we are faced with, right? Like the home situation, right? First-time home buyers are exempt, right? So I'm not saying that there is an exemption for sure in this example, but the way that you give forth the example, right? It's a valid way. It's a valid question. Obviously, there's no question which are invalid. It's a very valid question, and maybe if it's posed to the Maraja directly, that look, this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, right? Like a person who's going to be on mat leave for the year, they're saving because they know they're not going to be able to work in that year. Why is that any different? Like you give the example of a person who's working month to month and working and paying, and I'll make a note of it, and we can follow up with that. But as it stands right now, because it's savings, it would be classified as Khums-liable. But again, we can find out more details about it, right? And I'll make a note of that too. Okay. Oh yes, sorry. Yes.
So, like, suppose if someone, like, God forbid, does drugs and everything, and then they have money in their bank, extra money, so they take 20% off of that, and they look at all the expenses that they spend on drugs. They have to add that up and then take 20% off of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said, like, unjustifiable expenses are obviously also excessive stuff, like you can pay for households and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you get excessive, that is also kind of like falls into the drug sort of category.
Correct. Yeah.
So like, what if like you do like $1,000 at Sephora or whatever, like makeup,
So I mean, if it's excessive and you can, we all know, we all know as individuals, male or female, if we're wasting money on things we shouldn't be buying, right? Certain things obviously we need, like let's say from women, we could say maybe they need makeup, right? It's not haram. It's not haram for women to wear makeup, right? There's limits in terms of the hijab and issues, but if it's a need that a woman has, that's not an expense that you could say is, it's not, then we wouldn't say that that she has to pay khums on it, right? If it's obviously within that level of moderation. and everybody has to determine their own level of where are they being excessive, right? And where are they, you know, buying what they need to buy, and where are they going overboard, right? Mm-hmm. I would say so, yeah. If you personally feel, or somebody personally feels that they've bought stuff that they shouldn't have bought, and you know, we all know ourselves, should be able to tell. I mean, it would be best to do that just in case, right? Yeah, and that goes for guys as well. If you're spending money on, not makeup, but on clothing, or you know. Yes.
First question, you know, the word lamentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some Sunni scholars historically have argued that lamentum only means more.
Yes.
But I don't have that fresh in my mind, but another terminology, the same terminology is used in Quran to outline the blessings outside
Mm-hmm.
right? So is there any, can you elaborate or even point me in the direction of the term lanem used in Quran, you know, how, you know, why Shias are only confining it,
Mm-hmm.
well, Sunnis are confining it to more when Shias are really
Mm-hmm.
everything. So, you know, just from our own research, you know, so.
Yeah, we can do it offline because I don't want to go into the semantics of the wordings and grammar. But there is a book available written by Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi about Khums in the history of Islam from the Shia Sunni perspective. There's at least 3 translations available. I'll give you the link of the safer translation to go to. Yeah.
Second question is that Sayyid, this is for Salah only, right? So don't you think, and I'm being a Sayyid myself, and it's an interesting question, but don't you think it's unfair to non-Sayyids, because Shia population is only 5-10% per Sayyid, right?
We'll be talking about that too at the end of at the last part.
And thirdly, Sayyid Muhammad Shirazi, you know, I trust him Shirazi passed away too, you know,
Mhm.
greatest perhaps very long time. He in his Tawzi says that zakat, you know, we say that it's not on the liquid cash.
Mhm.
He says that ihtiyat wajib is on liquid cash as well.
Mhm.
So how do we consolidate both, you know, again, it's only his opinion.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? We can talk offline.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. I don't want to detract this discussion on this issue. Thank you. New and unused items. So the ruling is not only on your cash savings, but if you have anything brand new that you've bought and you've never used it for an entire year, you have to pay khums on it, right? So you go one day and I don't know, dress shirts are on sale, or men's 3-piece suits are on sale. You know, you buy 3 suits and you only wear 2 of them. One has never been worn, even for a minute. It sat in your closet for the whole year. Or a woman, she buys 3 purses. Not that women would ever buy shoes or purses, but just hypothetically, if a woman bought a pair of shoes, she bought 3 pairs of shoes, only wore 2 pairs, 1 pair sat in the closet, never worn, never touched. On anything that is brand new, that has never been used, khums is applicable on that at the current retail price of it, right? So you bought a shirt, you bought a watch, you bought jewellery, purses, right? Anything, and you never use it. 1 whole year went and you never even touched it. Khums is applicable on that item.
What if you wore it but you wear it out of the house?
As long as you've worn it, and that will be classified as being used, like you've ripped the labels off, right? You've used it, you wore it around the house, even you wore it in the backyard, it's used. That's sufficient, right? So that's why we say even when girls get married and you get a lot of gold and jewelry, just wear it, right? Even wear it one time, and just wear all of it and walk out, you know? Don't let it sit for a year. If you can wear it, right, you know, make sure you use it, right? I mean, if you bought it, you bought it because you needed it, right? I mean, in most cases we buy stuff, although I know we buy stuff that we don't need, right? But if you've bought something, then you need to make sure that you use it within that 1 year period. Otherwise, it is Khums-liable, right? Just today, actually, I was watching CBC. They had a documentary on the amount of clothing that goes into the landfills in Canada, and they said the average Canadian buys 70 new clothing outfits a year, 70, and they were showing that out of all of that, how much of it ends up in landfills, right? Because a lot of us won't actually go and recycle it or give it to Goodwill or send it overseas, right? But even when you send it overseas, they're showing in Kenya, in Nairobi, that a lot of the clothing that came from Canada was being burnt. They're literally putting the clothing in piles and burning it because they can't sell it, right? So the moral of the story is that we are a very wasteful society, right? We always buy more, right? We'll go to Costco, but we'll buy like 12 tubes of toothpaste. I mean, really, one tube of toothpaste could last you maybe a month, maybe if you're a single person, right? Why you gotta buy 12 at one time, right? So when you have that mentality, that big box mentality that just buy, if you have stuff left over and it is brand new, you have to pay khums on it. But the one thing which is, and I'll clear this up because it was a misconception in our community, is that if you have things at home that are partially used, there's no khums on it. So you buy makeup, it's half a bottle left, you don't pay khums because you've already used half of it. There's no value on a half a bottle, right? You buy a bottle of CK, right? It's $120 for a bottle of aftershave or men's cologne. Half of it is used, half of it's left over. You don't pay khums on that half because there's no market value of it. Nobody would buy a half-used bottle of perfume from you, right? Or half a bottle of whatever. Or you go home and you see, okay, I have a 10-kilogram bag of rice left. It was a 50-bag rice, 50-pound bag. I used 40. 10 pounds really has no market value. Like you can't go and sell it. You couldn't take the bag back to Superstore and get money for it, right? So if you have things at home that are used, but there's still something left in it, like this bottle of water, I mean, you wouldn't pay khums on it if at the end of your year you saw I have a little bit of water left, right? Because there's no value to that. Yes?
That goes for electronics as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, anything that, has value, yes. Yeah. If you can, I mean, if you can rationalize in your mind that it's used, sure. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, but like you don't abandon a house here. Let's say you have some food in your house, then you have not opened it, like you have a thing of oil or you have some atta or
Sure.
rice. Like sometimes you buy 2 bags
Yeah.
cheaper. Do you have to pay khums on all those? Are those considered savings?
Yes. Yeah. So if you bought let's say 2 things of atta, of flour, and you only and you didn't only use 1 bag, you'd pay on that 1 bag. Or you went to Costco and you bought 12 tubes of toothpaste or 24 toothbrushes, right? You have, let's say, 12 toothbrushes left at the end of the year. Those 12 toothbrushes still have some retail value, right? Because they're brand new in a box.
So then my reply would be then once it's like Ramadan, you should stop going to Costco. And you should let your stuff run out. So that when Muharram comes, then you can buy again for the rest of the year and stock up because it is cheaper to buy things in bulk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, keep in mind that not everybody uses Muharram as their khums day. You can use any day of the year, right? And we'll look at that later on because there's a bit of a loophole in the Islam. If you use the non-Islamic calendar, it's actually better for you. You'll save money. Yes.
What if like you're posting and like 2 days before you bought a bag,
Yeah.
there's no time, but 2 days before you posted, and you haven't used it until you're
At a theoretical level, yes, you would be paying khums on it if you haven't used it. If you haven't opened it up and just even cook a pot of rice type of thing, right? But again, it's on the value, right? So, I mean, let's say the rice costs you $20. You're only paying $4 on that bag, right? If you bought toothpaste, it's like what? Maybe $1 a tube. You have 5 tubes, let's say that's like $5. So that's like $1 of khums. So they're little amounts, right? It's not like you're paying on the actual full retail value of that bag of rice or that outfit that you bought. It's the value of that 20% of that value of that item, right? Let's move on. So here's a fun one. Burial items. We all gotta die sometime. You go to Najaf or Karbala, you buy a coffin. You didn't die that year, alhamdulillah. But you got a coffin that you haven't used, right? You're not gonna just put it on and walk around the house in your beautiful coffin, right? Unless you're really sadistic, you might, but most people don't wear their coffin, right? So you buy a coffin and you keep it, and people want to have the turbas and the maybe a aqiq ring and all these things. Just as a side note, it's actually mustahab to have your own coffin. There's actually hadith that tell us if you want to live longer, buy a coffin. Don't wait for the Jamaat to give you their kafan, because they'll overcharge you anyways. Not this Jamaat, generally speaking. But if you buy your own kafan, you actually, Allah says, I'm going to let you live longer, because you're preparing for your own akhirat. So if you want to live long, buy a kafan. Right? When you go to Iran or Iraq for ziyarat, you get beautiful kafans, right? Also, it's mustahab to spend the most amount of money on your kafan. Don't be cheap. Right? Don't go because if you go to Iran or Iraq, you can buy a cheap kafan for like $20. It's really rough material, really coarse, right? But you can buy high quality cotton. You might spend $50, $60, $100, but it's mustahab. It's recommended to spend as much as you can on a kafan. I mean, we spend thousands on shalwar kameez and suits and nice clothes when we're alive. Keep in mind, on the day of judgment, we'll be raised up in that kafan, and the hadith tell us that the people who are raised on the day of judgment, they'll actually boast with one another that I have a better kafan than you do. So buy a kafan, spend the money, spend $100, right? But buy a good quality kafan. You're going to live longer. Allah guarantees you buy the kafan, I'm going to give you an extra life, right? So do that. It's recommended. But if you don't use it in the first year, and obviously if you don't die, then you have to pay the khums on that value. So again, $100 kafan is $20 of khums only. But obviously it's something to, it's an investment, right, that we buy for our future. No, you never pay khums again on that. Yeah. So khums is a one-time thing. You pay khums on it, never again do you pay khums on that item again. One question came up at our will seminar a few months ago about the burial plots, right? Because many times we might ask the Jamaat or institution that organizes the burials that we want to buy and reserve a plot. So I asked a couple of scholars about it, and I didn't really get a straight answer from them, because there's two different ways you can look at it. If you consider, and we'd probably have to find out from different communities and how they deal with the plots within their own community. But if you consider that the amount is a donation to the Jamaat, right, and maybe you get a tax deductible receipt, so you're donating an amount of money, and they're saying, okay, in return, in the future when you die, we'll have a plot for you, then there will be no khums on that plot, right? No matter how long it is, because now you're not buying physically an amount of land in the graveyard. You're buying the right to use their land that the Jamaat owns. But if you have an opportunity to actually physically buy your own plot, and that's your specific plot, maybe you have land back home. A lot of people will have land back home in their home country, maybe in their own graveyard that they've got as a family establishment, right? In that case, obviously, if it's not used within the year, you don't die, that plot isn't utilized, then there would be khums on the value of what that plot was when it was initially purchased. So I don't know here in Edmonton if the Jamaat is holding those plots in the name, like obviously the Jamaat owns the land of the city owns the graveyard, right? The Jamaat is even buying out from the city, and I think the members do they get a receipt if they purchase?
Yeah, so
they do, huh?
Member who chooses, you actually own the plot. You have
Mhm.
the title.
To that physical plot, you own that.
Physical plot.
Okay.
And it's in your name for as long as you own it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that raises a question about myself. I bought a plot several years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't realize that there is khums on it.
Mhm.
So do I pay a khums on it for today's current market value, or do I pay khums on the value that I paid?
Most likely on the price that you paid, because if we didn't know the ruling. But I'm going to still check with probably Ayatul Sistani directly about this, because the people I asked, they didn't have a clear-cut answer on the ruling. So I'm going to find out the actual how it should be in terms of that. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, back to the unused items. Sometimes you get a gift, sometimes you get a gift, right? And I have sunny, like that precaution that we just took on it.
Mhm.
And you get a gift, like a dining set or whatever, and it's used, unused, once you're passed by, how do you calculate that?
Yeah. So with the gifts, like Ayatul Sistani says, based on precaution, you have to pay khums, which means that if you find who the next most knowledgeable scholar would be, let's just say it's Ayatollah just I'll pull a name out, Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi. If he has a fatwa that says khums isn't paid on gifts, then you're scot-free. There's nothing to worry about.
Whoever I think is,
Is the second most knowledgeable after the manager that you follow.
and then if he says that, oh, gifts or not, then I can just follow him on that.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And if you had to pay khums, you just maybe do a Google search and see if that product's available and what the price of it is, and then pay that 20% of that value. But
Does the caution apply to every fatwa? Like suppose if there's a fatwa about namaz and it's saying precaution.
yeah, it goes for every fatwa, every ruling. Wherever there's a precaution, what they call an obligatory precaution, then you can follow the next most knowledgeable in that area. Yeah. Gifts by people. So sometimes we might get a gift from somebody and we know that they don't pay khums, right? Maybe we know family who don't pay, but you received a gift from somebody. The rule is that if you get a gift from somebody and they don't pay khums, it's not up to you to worry about it. That's up to them and Allah. So you worry about your own responsibility. They will have to pay, obviously, with Allah. They'll have to work that out with Allah on the Day of Judgment. But if somebody gives you a money or a gift and you know for sure that that person doesn't believe in it, then they don't pay khums, you don't have to worry about that. That's not up to you to be concerned about. Going to some non-tangible products, right? First one is permanent life insurance that maybe some people have. It's also called whole life insurance. Scholars say that particular form of life insurance is not a deductible expense. It's a type of savings, right? Because it's paid out at the maturity of the policy, or at the time of the death. In case of death, it's whoever was the beneficiary of the insurance policy. And so because a permanent life insurance is like a savings plan, it's not like the term life, right? Sometimes people buy term life insurance. Let's say they have a mortgage on their home. They know that if the man was to pass away, that the family couldn't pay, so you'll get a term life, maybe at whatever, $500,000 or whatever. Term life is a valid expense, so you wouldn't pay khums on that. But if you have a permanent life insurance, a whole life, because that's a form of savings, and it's relatively small in most cases, depending on when you start it and how much the policy is, there would be khums on that particular life insurance policy. So there is a difference between those two. So permanent life is khums applicable life insurance. All other kinds of insurances, automobile insurance, home insurance, medical insurance, you have Blue Cross or some medical coverage. Any kinds of other insurance plans that are there, they're all valid deductions, which means there's no khums applicable. So if you're paying your home and cars, let's say $2,000 a year insurance, you don't pay khums on that money. That's a valid expense on that. The one thing which I haven't been able to figure out, it's not an issue here, but Jamaats that have a burial scheme. I haven't seen, I was trying to get in touch with some scholars and I wasn't able to. But if I'll make a note of that. So some communities have a burial scheme where each member pays a certain amount every year, $100, $200, and then when they or their family member passes away, there's a process by which that money goes into the burial of that individual, so it's less you're paying. I'm going to look into that to see what the ruling is on that, because that's in a way it is a form of an insurance policy as well. So it may be covered into this, but I'm going to confirm that just so we know. Yeah.
Along the same line, for every taxpayer who died, I believe every person qualifies for a certain amount for CPP. I believe it's $2,500 or something.
Yes.
So if I'm the benefactor of that, am I paying khums on that?
I'll make note of that one, also get a ruling on that one as well. Yeah. In terms of the pensions, though, for example, the CPP and non-mandatory pensions that we are probably having deductions from work. Mandatory pensions, so for example, we have a CPP that the government takes off every paycheck from us, and if we're self-employed, we're making those contributions. Obviously, that's a mandatory expense, so that is khums free. I mean, we don't have to pay any money on that. But when you get that money back, when you do retire, you get money from the government at retirement time. Again, that would be a form of income that we talked about in the beginning. Non-mandatory pensions, as we mentioned, that those are like things that we personally contribute into, like the RRSPs and other such things. Maybe at work you might have an RRSP contribution program or some additional savings programs. The money that you pay into it is Khums-liable, obviously. And so you have to keep in mind how much you're putting in, that it's not a large amount, that you might not have enough liquid assets to cover the Khums. And if you do, obviously, then there's discussions that have to happen to be able to cover that.
Even in the company pensions, if you pay towards the pension within your company.
Yeah. So if it's mandatory that employees have to pay, then that's a valid expense. That's okay. Yeah. So a couple of examples that we talked about. You know how if you going over your need, your greed, and that you have to pay Khums on that. So just two examples. So obviously household expenses will differ amongst everybody. And how much we earn, how much we spend, obviously is according to our own personal lifestyles. But the example here is that a person has a net income of 80,000 a year. Based on who they are in the community and the society within their family, they should be spending 50,000, let's just say, right? And we know how much we should spend. We're not going excess. So you should be spending 50, but you think, you know what, I'm going to try to bypass the whole Khums system and, you know, buy the big TV and buy this and buy that and waste more of my money so I can pay less Khums. And so because of that, you spend 70,000 rather than 50. So you're actually having to pay Khums on 30,000, not on the $10,000 difference. So this is where Islam says, you know, look at your need and look at your greed. Right? If you need something, and we all know when we need it, go and buy it, right? Don't worry about it. But if you know that you have, and you don't need that other thing, but you're just trying to circumvent the system, and you want to just buy and buy to not have to pay the Khums, then we're told that you need to actually pay the Khums on that amount that you've spent, which was, again, not a valid expense within your year. Yeah.
So what if it be like a woman and then they're like, okay, I got some money and I want to use this time when I go big.
Mhm.
Like I'm gonna get nice,
Mhm.
that's kind of like you just want it, like you need a TV, but you want a big one, but you're not necessarily like trying to avoid it, also just want a
Yeah. Again, I mean, we're all like Allah says in the Quran, "Balil insanu ala nafsihi basira," that we all know ourselves better, right? Allah isn't going to come and, you know, tell us, okay, you have to pay this much Khums. He's giving us the ability to judge ourselves accordingly, right? If I really, you know, if my TV dies, I need to buy a new TV, okay. Can I get away with a 55-inch compared to the 75-inch? Yeah, I can. If I just want to say, well, I'm going to go ahead and buy the big one just to avoid the Khums, then obviously then we know deep down inside that we shouldn't be doing it. But if somebody can justify it to themselves and say, well, you know what, I may as well buy something a bit better quality. Let's say I could buy the Walmart brand TV, or I could buy a Sony or Panasonic, and it's going to give me it's going to last me more, right? Better warranty, right? Maybe then it makes sense, right, to buy the better brand. Spend more money because you're getting maybe a double or triple warranty, which is, you know, you're going to save in the long run. So a lot of other factors come into play, but again, we should determine that ourselves and make sure that we're honest with ourselves, right, with Allah. And the opposite side of the spectrum, if you should be spending 50,000, you make 80,000 net, you should be spending 50, but you become a bit cheap. Right? You don't turn up the heat at home, you keep your family in the cold, throw on some sweaters, wear a blanket when you're, you know, put 3 blankets on. I've heard people do this, like they'll turn the thermostat down so low just to save money, right? Or it's crazy to think, but people live like this, right? They just try to save and become not, you know, there's one thing about being thrift-worthy, right? Looking for deals and bargains, that's okay. But when you're going to put your family and yourself through hardship just to save a couple of dollars, like, you know, 1 meal a day, you know, we're not going to do this, we're not going to go on vacation, we're not going to, you know, have the heater on, we're not going to turn the air conditioning on to save on bills, 1 shower a week, you know. Then if you're excessively going towards being really, really cheap, then you need to pay again on the opposite end, right? You need to pay more Khums because you should have been spending more on your family and yourself. Right? It's all about balance in life. Spend how much you need to spend. Don't be cheap about it. Right? Be thrift worthy. Look for the deals. Shop. Get, you know, use the coupon apps and whatever. But don't get to the point where you're not even caring about yourself or your family, right? Like, that's not what Islam expects from us. Spend, enjoy your life. Allah tells us in the Quran, right? Allah says, who is there that would prevent people from benefiting from the blessings that Allah has given us, right? Allah gives us the money to use it, right? Give in charity, but do for yourself. Be good to yourself. Don't be so cheap that you don't, think about your own personal well-being. Women who earn, obviously, we live in a society where women work. There's no problem with that. A woman who earns, obviously, her own income, she has to pay khums from her own surplus. After her expenses, her makeup and this and that are paid for, and her shoes and purses. Enjoy her life, but she has to pay khums as well. And it goes to her marja. So if her husband follows somebody else, that's, her accounting is separate from her husband's. If she's giving money into the home for expenses, that's great. She doesn't have to. She's not obligated to support the husband in terms of daily expenses. If she wants to support, she can do that. But whatever earnings she has, her savings, that she should obviously be paying her own khums when it comes to that. Inheritance rules, as we mentioned last time in the session, if a person is to pass, when a person passes away, so let's just say person dies on July the 15th. His khums date was July the 30th. So obviously he's passed away, he hasn't paid the khums. It's imperative on the family, whoever's the executor of that will of that individual, whoever executes the estate, pays all the bills, takes care of all the expenses, that they also make sure that their khums is paid. So that person lived from July 30th of the previous year till July 15th, so he had 1 year minus 15 days. He had khums on him that he would have paid if he had lived. So the inheritors need to make sure that before they divide the estate up and people get what they are entitled to, that they figure out how much khums this person owed. Right? And so that's why, again, I go back to the point that as Muslims, we have to be good accountants. We should know how to do all the number crunching. We should keep records, right? Whether it's online or printed records of when my khums date is. Have I paid on my investments? Have I paid on, I bought stuff? Do I have stuff that's Khums-liable? We should be very meticulous and careful about it, right? Allah will forgive if we make a mistake, but we have to do the best in terms of calculating what we owe back to Allah, right? And it becomes difficult when you think about it, right? Think about your own personal life, that it's hard for you and I to do our own khums. Imagine now you having to do the khums from a family member who passed away. You've got to find all their bank accounts, right? They have the PayPal accounts, they have online accounts, you got to find all their money, put it all together, and then pay the khums from it, right? So we have to be careful that we make it easy for our people who live after us, to make this process easy for them also. I'm going to try to get through this in the next 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully, because I see the food is also here, so I don't want to keep people from the food. But when to pay khums? Khums becomes obligatory, as we said, at the beginning of your financial year, on the profit or surplus of your past year's income. So, 1 year is basically the window. Now, some scholars do differ on this, right? Because somebody may ask the question, well, what if I keep July 15th as my khums date? July 14th, I get paid $5,000. What do I do? Do I pay khums on it? Some scholars say, yes, you pay khums on that money. Other scholars say, no, because you haven't had it for a year. Yes, your khums date came, but you've only had the money for 1 day, right? If you wait another year, then you would pay khums on it. Some scholars say, no, you can actually have multiple khums dates. If you expect large sums of money at certain times of the year, keep a very good record in your accounts. That, okay, June I got this much money, July I got this much, August I got this, and spend accordingly. But khums becomes obligatory at the beginning of your year. You can use either the Islamic calendar or the Common Era calendar. As I said, there's a legal loophole. If you want to save 30 days or 10 days a year of khums, pick the Common Era calendar, right? Don't use the Islamic calendar because it's 10 days less every year. So if you use the Common Era, January to December, you gain 10 days a year to spend. So every 3 years, you've got an extra month of spending money. And it's not haram, it's a legal loophole. But it just, you can make it, right? This is the flexibility of the religion. You can use these permissible ways within the calendar. You could do Muharram to Muharram, but you're going to lose out. Every 3 years, you're going to be paying for an extra month. So use a common era calendar, pick a date from January to December, save 10 days a year. Every 3 years you've got an extra month of money to spend. Now going actually to the actual specifics of the khums is how much is the khums? As I said, it is 20%, 1/5 of your net savings. So you have your 100%, 80% are your expenses, the legitimate expenses through the year. 20% is the khums. And then from there, the scholars, based on that verse of the Quran that I'll probably touch upon again in a minute or two, half of that goes towards the imam's portion, and half of that is the portion of the sadat that somebody had asked about previously. So a very simple, obviously, methodology of calculation is you take all of your cash, your liquid assets, unused items that have a value to them, anything else which is khums payable, take that figure, multiply it by 20%, and you have your khums due, right? So you've saved 50,000 at the end of the year, you've got your RRSPs paid, you put into the tax tree, you put your children's educational money in. That whole amount was 50,000, you put 20% of that, which is $10,000. That is your khums amount for that particular year. As we said, that is divided to two categories. 50% go to the sadat, which will explain who that is, and 50% belongs to the infallible, the prophet or the imam of the time. According to that verse that we talked about at the beginning, there were a few categories, right? When Allah says that 1/5 of your whatever you gain, there's ghanimat, is for Allah, for the messenger. Allah is the first category, so Allah has a share in the khums. Rasulullah has a share in the khums. And then the dhil qurba, the close family members of the Prophet, the orphans from the family of the Prophet, the needy from the family of the Prophet, and the people who are Sayyid, Sadat, who are stuck in a journey, right? They traveled somewhere and they're stuck, they don't have money to get back home, right? These are the individuals who the khums reaches. Now, the first two shares belong to Allah and the Prophet. Allah said that khumusahu lillahi wa li rasul, right? The third share, that of the near relative, we believe is the infallible imam of the time, which in our case is our 12th imam. And the latter three are the family members of the Bani Hashim, which are the orphan, the needy, and the stranded traveler. I'll explain these now. So the first one is Allah. Now obviously Allah doesn't come down to earth to take his 20%, right, of the money. He doesn't take his cut. So his share of the khums goes to the representative of Allah, which is the Prophet. And so the Prophet is Allah's representative. He's the authority. He receives Allah's portion of the khums, and he receives his portion, because one portion of that verse was for the messenger of Allah. The question comes as well, what happens to the Prophet's share and Allah's share? Allah gave his share to the Prophet. The Prophet is no longer with us on earth right now, physically alive. Where does his money go? Do we just bury it in the ground? There's a discussion that the Shias had at the time of the Ghaibat. I don't want to go into much of it, you can read about it, but some of our early Shias believe that we bury the money in the ground until the 12th Imam comes. He'll take it out and then he'll use it. But it seemed logical at that time because they didn't know the Imam would go into a 1200-year Ghaibat, right? The 12th Imam. But after a little while, people are like, well, this doesn't make sense. You can't just bury the money. It's gonna go waste, right? You're going to bury all this gold, and now we have paper currency. You can't just bury it and then do what with it? So what happens to the share of the Prophet? After the death of the Prophet, we believe that the share of Allah and Rasulullah go to his rightful successor. Right, so that was Imam Ali, then Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Imam Zainul Abidin, all the way down the line up until our 12th Imam, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In addition, our 12th Imam, he not only gets Allah's share and the Prophet's share and the family, the Dhil Qurba, he gets also, so that's all his share as being the custodian after Rasulullah. So that is why we have the Sahmi Imam, this portion of the Imam. That is why, or that's where we get that definition, that's the Imam's portion. During the time when our first 12 Imams were living and we were able to access them, they would take that money directly. It was given to them in their hand, or if they had a representative, right? So many of our Imams had representatives in Baghdad, in Qum, in Samara, in different cities. And if the imam was in another city, the Shias would take their homes to that particular representative of the 12th imam or the 5th imam or the 9th imam, whoever it was. And so they would use that money. We also have that portion, what was the Sadat, right? The orphan, the stranded traveler, the poor people. So that was the portion of the imam. That was the right of the Hashemite. So that was also given to the representative, to the Prophet or his representative. We come to our time, the ghaibat, the occultation of our 12th imam. He has not appointed anybody as his special agent. So nobody on earth today can claim to be a special deputy directly appointed by our 12th imam. And so what our scholars say is that the share of the imam, which is the portion for Allah, the Prophet, and the 12th imam, that should be used in causes which the 12th imam would be comfortable with, that it's something that he would use that money in. So we're saying that, the imam, you're not here, but we believe that you would like to use this money in certain areas, and I'll give you a few examples. And what we do is we give it to the mujtahid that we follow, whoever we do taqleed to, we'll give him that money, and he will use that money. So just some examples where it's used is to help the poor and needy Shia nationally, globally, right? It's used around the world, the Sahma Imam, to help needy Shias. It's used for education and propagation of our religion, right? Much of the work that you see happening, books that are published, some of the satellite TV stations, a lot of the work that's being done is done through Khums money. Religious scholars who are studying, who are working in the field, not all of them, but some of them are being financed through the Khums money. I'll give you reasons why. And to build centers, right? To build our masajid, imam bargas, to renovate them, right? A lot of that money comes from the Khums. It's sometimes personal donations, but a lot of it is from the portion of the imam. I mean, if you look at the center in Toronto, I think they spend over $15 to $20 million. 1/4 of that at least is Khums money. Out of 20 million, they've spent at least 5 million to build the Jaffrey Center in Toronto. And many other centers in Canada are the similar, there's a similar usage of that Khums money. We should keep in mind that much of the imam's portion of Khums, it never reaches to our mujtahid. In fact, Ayatul Sistani has clearly even said that, don't bring the money to me. I don't want it in Najaf. He would rather it be used in other parts of the world, and he's given recent statements as well where the Khums should be used. So most of that is used locally within our communities, right? And that's why we see our centers are being at least sustained, right? Maybe more could be used, but obviously that calls for many other issues. But much of what we have today is because of the Sahma Imam. I'll give you just one very, very practical example of this. The Hawza Ilmiya of Qum, where many of our students go to get their religious studies, in the 1980s, there were about 15,000 students in the Hawza of Qum. This is right at the time of the revolution. If you figure that every student was given $30 a month allowance, that's $450,000 a month that the Hawza was spending. Today, there's over 40,000 students in Qum, from Canada, from America, from South America, from Australia, from all around the world. I think we have students from every single country in the Hawza of Qum. My own neighbor that I had in Qum was ethnic Chinese, Sayyid from China. We had friends from Burkina Faso, from Comoro Islands, from countries that I've never heard of. Today, we have 40,000 students and teachers in Qum. They get a minimum of $150 a month. The higher the studies, you get more support from the Hawza. That's a minimum of $6 million a month, not a year, but a month that we're spending on the Hawza of Qum, 6 million. And there's no government funding that comes to the students of the Hawza. It's all private endowments, Khums money, people who just give out of the free that they have, they give to the Hawza to run that establishment. Right? So you can see that a lot of that money is used for these kinds of purposes. One of the reasons why we have this Khums and the scholars benefit from it is that it plays a role in the independence of our ulama. Right? That we don't have to depend on a government. Right? Many of our Sunni brethren, unfortunately, their scholars in the major countries are paid by the government. So when the Imam of Makkah gives his khutbah, right, he's being paid by the Saudi government. Right? No matter how good they might be out on the apparent, right, their governments are telling them what to say in the Friday prayers. Maybe Egypt, maybe other countries are similar fashion. But within our Shia establishment, we don't have this concept where our ulama are told to say something. And it happens, unfortunately, in some communities that scholars, because they're being paid, they say what the people want them to say. That's up to them to do that, right? But ultimately, that financial independence means that our ulama are free to talk about things that people might not like, that people don't want to hear about, but it is a reality. And having that freedom the economic freedom allows our ulama to pass fatwa which will not be in line with what the government wants, right? And we've had ulama like the late Mirza Shirazi, who in the early time of Iran actually ended up destroying the British monopoly on tobacco in Iran by passing a fatwa. Right? There was an issue that happened in Iran where the government passed a ruling that all the tobacco grown in Iran would be shipped to UK at a very low price. The farmers would not be compensated adequately. The British would refine, purify the tobacco, make cigarettes or whatever, and sell it back to Iran at an inflated price. So what Mirza Shirazi did is he passed the fatwa. He says, and the fatwa still stands, the paper is still there. And basically in one line he wrote, the translation says that from today onwards, use of tobacco is equivalent to waging war against the 12th Imam. And literally overnight, the British, the Iranian government, this is the time of the Shah, they had to rethink their entire policy. Right? So one fatwa from one mujtahid making tobacco haram because of this issue of the British colonizing changed the entire destiny of a Shia country. Now, had he been paid by the Shah, he could never pass a fatwa like that, because he would be in the pocket of the Shah. But having independence meant he can speak against the government and he can change the entire community. The second half of the khums is for the orphan, the needy, and the stranded traveler, as we said, from the Prophet's family. And that is the Bani Hashim, the Hashemite. And those are people who trace their lineage to the great-grandfather of the Prophet from the father's line. So there's a misconception in our community that the Sayyids are the children of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. And they are Sayyids, but they're not the only ones entitled to khums. Right? The late Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Rida Gul Paigani, in his Islamic rulings, he was clear that khums is for Banu Hashim, not just Sayyids, meaning from the lineage of Bibi Fatima and Imam Ali alayhi salam, and from their children. So there is, but obviously, not many people will trace their lineage from another route to Hashim. And so our scholars do say that the family of the Prophet, through Lady Zahra, that they do take precedence over other Banu Hashim. Again, for our sake, it's easier just to say the Sayyids, the Sadat. But if you go right down to the crux of it, it's not just the Sayyids from the line of that. So, even like Aqil, the son of the brother of Imam Ali, technically him and his family they can take khums, right? But we don't know, do we know who's from that lineage? We might not know. A couple of points we conclude. I only have about 4 slides left here. The recipients of the Sadat portion, they will always change. They're never fixed, right? So meaning that an orphan, they might be entitled to khums today because they're an orphan, they're not baligh. But once they become adults, they're no longer considered as an orphan in that way, right? You're not a 30-year-old man and you're an orphan, so you still take khums. When you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, okay. But once you're on your own 2 feet, you're a young man or a young lady, then obviously it changes. A needy person, as soon as they become financially independent, they're no longer on that roster of taking khums money. A traveler, he might be poor where he is, but back home he has money. So as long as he gets enough to get back home he's from the family of the Prophet, he can take the khums or she can take the khums. But when any of those criteria cease to exist, then khums is no longer allowed for them to take. A point to make note is that even if you have a Sayyid who is a Sayyid, they have the proof of it, they have claim to it, but if they are an open sinner, if they openly break the rules of Islam, then they don't get khums. We even asked the scholars in Qum, the office of Ayatollah Sistani and other scholars, what about a Sayyid woman who openly doesn't wear hijab? She doesn't care about hijab. She says, I don't believe in this business of hijab. Even if she's needy because she's from the Sayyid, but she's an open sinner, she's not entitled to use khums money. Maybe you can help her in other ways, but not that money. Maybe you have a Sayyid who drinks, who does other haram. They are entitled to the khums, but now because they're one who is committing sins in public, they're openly sinning, they're not entitled to use that money. So it's not a carte blanche, oh, I'm a Sayyid, here's my ID card, give me my khums money, and they just live and sit back and relax and don't work. No, it's for when you have trouble, right? If you're a Sayyid and you can get a job, you're working, it's not your right to take that money just because you have that bloodline, right? You have to be needy and deserving of that, like any money, right? Even in Canada, you can't just live off the system because you were lazy, you don't want to work, right? You have to prove that you're needy. And same with khums, you have to prove that you're needy. You can't just say, oh, I'm a Sayyid, give me your khums and I'll take it, right? People do that sometimes. They'll come to a new community, I'm Sayyid, give me your khums. Where's your proof? They're your Sayyid first of all. Your black turban doesn't prove it, right? Unfortunately, we've had people who have come to communities. They come to this community, not this, but they come to a community with a black turban, and then they go back to their own community, they have a white turban on. White turban usually signifies that they're non-Sayyid. Black turban means they're a Sayyid. I've seen it myself, people who have come, they're Sayyid today, tomorrow I've seen pictures that have a white turban on. What happened? How did you change? Too much bleach in the laundry and your turban went from black to white? I've seen it with two people, unfortunately. So we have to be careful. Don't just trust people. Oh, give me your khums money. No, we have to be careful, right, when we give that. I'll conclude with these last slides. Who do you give your khums money to? A is your marja taqleed directly. If you go to Najaf or Iraq or Iran or wherever they are, if you want to give it to them directly, you can do that. Again, some of our maraja say don't do that. I know when the time of Saddam, for example, the maraja were like, don't bring your khums money to Iraq because Saddam was in power. Even today, Ayatul Sistani says, use it where you are living. Don't bring it here. If you have a local scholar in a community who holds permission from the marja, and you should ask them for written confirmation. If your local scholar has written permission from the marja, he has to show it to you. If he says, give me your khums, don't take his word for it. Ask him, can I see your proof? If they have proof and you trust them, then give them the khums. And if you have any local, national, international institutions who have permission and you trust them, then give them the khums money as well. Ultimately, as I conclude, we have the saying that the more you give, the more that you receive, right? Yeah, it's a lot of money, 20%. For some people, I've personally seen people when I used to work in institutions whose khums money was $100,000 in a year. That means they had $500,000 in savings. I know a person who knew a person whose khums for 1 year was $250 million. That means his savings was over $1 billion a year. But he paid $250 million in khums in 1 year, right? So the point being is that, yeah, it's a lot of money, but look where it goes. It goes back to this community, right? It goes back to where you live, right? It goes back to our centers, our communities, our institutions. If we're not going to support our institutions, then how will they flourish? How will they sustain, right? We only have, we have the 80% savings, but if we have the khums money to use for such projects, then we should obviously try and maximize that ability that we have. I'll close with this, and we'll make this PowerPoint available if people want to have a copy of it. We did reference the seminar that Maulana Rizvi had done in Toronto 4 years ago for a lot of the information, so the link is on YouTube. Maulana Rizvi also has a very detailed book on khums. The last version came out about 8 years ago, I think. The old version is still online. And this book by Ayatul Nasir Makarim Shirazi, which I mentioned to you about, I've translated the book. It wasn't ever published, but there are 2 other published versions online. I'll get the links out. He goes into the history of khums from the Shia, the Sunni, the time of the Imams, the word ghanimat, what does it mean in the Arabic? He breaks it down quite in detail. And last but not least, other references which are available. There's a good article called A Critique of the Question of Khums. Maulana Rizvi again did a lecture on Ahlul Bayt TV on khums about 2 years ago. That's online. He did a seminar in Dar es Salaam, which is also online, and Sheikh Murtaza Bachu in Vancouver, just nearing us. He also did a good lecture series seminar on khums, and you can also refer to that one. And last, if you have any questions other than this from here, you can even email me if there's any clarification, and we can inshallah help you out on that. Yes.
My understanding is for dividends, whenever you get it, the person is
if the money is locked in and you can't access it, right?
Because it's like, I mean, you belong to the,
Yeah.
with the dividends and all that she
Yeah.
has.
So generally speaking, if it's locked in and you can't access it, then you wouldn't pay homes. But if you do have access to the funding, then you would have to pay the homes on it
But then where you get the money?
when you get the money.
Because they pay like every month, right? So
Mhm.
it's not that paying.
Yeah. Again, I mean, if you were to take it out and those dividends, you would have that time to use it, right? So if you got a dividend from an investment, you would have up to your homes date to make use of that money. And if nothing was left over, then there would be no homes on it, right? Yes.
So the two, what do you call, legitimate money that's homes payable,
Mhm.
you say from the surplus or the profit of income and legitimate wealth mixed with illicit wealth.
Yes.
The second one is very questionable. So let's say, this doesn't refer to me, but I'm just giving an example.
Sure.
If somebody, won in the lottery,
Okay.
and that money is mixed with, his halal money,
Mhm.
which is homes payable.
Yes.
Generally, we know how much we have earned from this illegitimate money.
Correct.
People try to cleanse that money by giving it to centers and to giving it to charitable organizations.
Mhm.
What is the ruling on that? Because it's a very questionable.
Yeah. So I mean, and definitely, and even in questionable money, like haram money could be a lot of things, right? For example, somebody owns a restaurant and they serve alcohol. Somebody owns a restaurant, they serve pork and bacon and non-halal meat. Somebody owns a convenience store and they sell a lot of haram things in the convenience stores, right? So all of those things, right? I mean, you have so much mixture. I mean, you maybe at like a lottery would be easy because okay, I won $1 million. You know how much right away. That doesn't mean to say that Islam says okay, do haram and you can purify your wealth, but ultimately, in order for you to be able to legally use any of that money, which is haram mixed with halal, and you have no idea how much is of either nature, that's why the ruling is that when you have that mixture and it's so convoluted, you don't know how much is of what, is that when you pay 20% on the entire amount, even on the halal amount before that, then everything becomes okay to use. So it is in a way, it is a way of a purification tax. But obviously it's not a license to do haram and then just say, okay, well, I'll pay the tax and I'll benefit from the proceeds of it. It's sort of like it's a way out if you unfortunately have got stuck in that situation and now you have wealth and you want to do the right thing with it.
So I can understand, if let's say my income is $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And the illegitimate money is roughly about $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, $200,000.
Okay.
We are talking of $100,000 income, and
Yes.
I won a $10 million lottery.
Yeah.
And then you mix the money.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. In those kinds of examples, it would be pretty easy to know. But let's say somebody owns a restaurant, right? Like you own a restaurant that sells pizzas, let's say, right? And you sell both haram toppings and halal, right? You might know at the end of the day, okay, I sold 20 large, 15 medium, 10 small. But you might not know, okay, well, a $12 pizza, how much is the amount of toppings which are haram on it? You won't know. Okay, well, it was bacon. So, is it 35 cents worth of bacon? Is it $1 worth of bacon? You don't know. Right? But all you know at the end of the day is you made $2,000 at the end of the day selling pizzas. You don't know how much was from haram toppings and how much was halal toppings. It's all in one. You got your amount at the end of the day, right? So in that kind of a case, that person needs to pay on the total amount. Yes. Quick guidelines. So quick guideline is that yes, so zakat, yes, A is wajib. B, it is only wajib, in Shia fiqh, zakat is only wajib on certain commodities. For example, if you're a farmer and you have wheat, you have grains, you have raisins, you have livestock, you have a certain number of cows, you have a certain number of sheep, goats, camels. You deal in gold and silver bullion, like not jewellery gold, but bricks of gold, right? Or silver. And they reach it to a certain amount, a certain measurable amount of gold and silver, right? They're not just, okay, I have a necklace or one bar of gold. Certain amounts for all of these. When your amounts reach those, when those products, if you have them, reach those amounts, then zakat becomes an obligation on those. Ayatollah Sistani, I've seen a ruling about him talking about zakat for people who own businesses and their inventory, but I don't know the specifics of it offhand right now. So I won't comment on it, but I know there is a ruling he has. But this is one of the differentiators between the Shia and the Sunni in our ahkam, in our jurisprudence. Yes, keep in mind that zakat, literally zakat is, we can define it not as a specific tax, but rather as a general purification tax, okay? And so what scholars will do is when they have the overarching concept of zakat, they'll put khums in it, sadaqah, they'll put zakatul fitr, all of these things will go under the category of zakat. It's like in Canada, we have tax, right? Tax is the overall, but then you have GST, you have HST, you have the PST, you have all the different types of taxes, but they're all taxes ultimately. So zakat we can say is tax, the general, but there's also a specific zakat. So zakat is the overlying arch, and then you have khums as a form of zakat. Sadaqah is a form of zakat. Zakatul fitr on the day of Eid is a form of zakat. Zakat itself on the animals, on livestock, on produce is a form of zakat. So it is applicable, but for most of us, it is not applicable. Right? And just like khums had things which it is obligation on, and some things khums is not obligated on, like mahar, like inheritance, right? So those are money that came into you, but they're not khums liable. So just like that, zakat is similar, that certain things, just because you get them, it doesn't mean that zakat is liable on that thing. I didn't discuss it, no, but I mean, for example, Sahm Imam can be used for needy Shias, right? It's been done, right? If you have a person who's non-Sayyid and they need financial assistance and community can't raise it, there's no community available, we can use Sahm Imam for that kind of a case. Sadaqah is a perfect example, right? Locally, Sadaqah is collected in many communities. There are people who will collect it and give it to people within their local community who they know, right? So sadaqah is another prime example, right? In some communities, you might collect $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month in sadaqah, right? I mean, many of us have a little jar at home, right? We'll put a quarter or a loonie a day, right? And now imagine even if you put $1 a day, that's $30 a month for one person. 10 people do that, that's $300 right there, right? So that sadaqah, again, it should be used locally. Our maraja are clear, right? There's certain monies that are collected that cannot leave your city. Like zakatul fitr, on the day of Eid, we give zakatul fitr. Ayatollah Sistani has had this ruling, we asked him like 15 years ago. And he told us, he said that if you have needy people in your city, you can't let your zakatul fitr go out of your country, out of your city, forget your country. People tell me, well, I'm from Afghanistan, on the day of Eid, I send my zakatul fitr there. No, you can't. If you have needy Shias in Edmonton, let's say, your zakatul fitr can't leave, right? It can't go to Pakistan, it can't go to India, it can't go to Iraq, right? They got needy people, but they've also got people over there who are rich and they should be taking care of their own, right? We have needy people in Edmonton, believe it or not. We have needy people in Toronto who are homeless Shias, who live on the streets, right? So we should use our money locally, zakatul fitr, sadaqah, khums, whatever, right? Use it locally for our needs, and when there's an excess, if we say, okay, you know what? We're taking care of our centers built, we have a roof over our heads, our community members are okay, then we can look outside, right? But we should make sure that we take care of our own people with our money and then go further beyond that, right? So charity really starts at home, and we should help one another out, right? Even if you look at the Quran, when Allah talks about sadaqah, right, helping others, the very first thing Allah says is to give to your parents, right? People will sometimes go and help the world, but their own parents aren't, well taken care of. People will go and give charity to, far off countries, but their own brothers and sisters are just having a difficult time making ends meet, or their brother or sister is unemployed, right? But yet they'll give charity to East Africa and India and Pakistan and Afghanistan to help those people, but their own family member is suffering, right? So Quran makes it clear that help your family out first, your parents, your siblings, and then look outside. Yes?
So let's say if you buy something,
Mhm.
and partially you have using money that on which you have already paid for. That's a car or something, right?
Okay.
I spend like 20,000 and 10,000 I have paid for on.
Okay.
And a couple of years later, I sell it. At that time, it's a depreciation. It
Mhm.
does not appreciate.
Yeah.
Right? So I get like 50% of that.
Okay.
Can I assume, or how does, like, do I have to take books on that?
So you buy a car, you use it, it depreciates, you sell it, you get the money.
Yeah,
Um,
like 50%
yeah.
when I was buying, I have paid close to 50% now. So is this 10,000 that I'm getting back, do I
Mhm.
have to pay close, or can I just assume it's the
Yeah, so no, you'd assume that 10,000 to be new money that has come to you. So if you had it for more than a year, then you would have to pay khums on that amount. So for little things, it becomes easy, but I know Maulana Rizzi mentioned one example, and we'll end with this, is if you have a house, right, and you sell your house, you have to be careful that you don't sell your house near your khums date. Because if you sell your house, let's say on July the 1st for, just to say, $500,000, and if you're not going to be moving or buying a new house until like next month, and your khums date comes in the middle, right, let's say July 1st you sell for $500,000, July 15th is your khums date. You have $500,000 in your account, but you're going to be buying your new house on July 30th, and the money will leave on July 30th. You got to pay khums on that money which is in your account on July the 15th at $500,000, even though you're going to be buying a house 15 days later. So when it comes to like issues like that, we have to be very careful. I know Maulana Rizvi talked about that in his seminar, and he was pretty emphatic about that you need to look at those issues, right? So don't sell before your khums date. Plan things out like accordingly, right? There might be some legal loophole within the religion that, to talk to the marja or his representative about it. If there's some circumstance where you just can't get out of it, selling the home and closing the deal before that, your khums date. But if you can get away from not doing any kind of major buying or things like that around your khums date, then try to be careful with that. Well, if you sell it and you get that money, then you're paying khums on that. Yes. 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 No, because now you've sold your house, right? Now this is new money coming into you, right? So there would be on that. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.